This material is created by EasyPathUni by Coordinations with Yazan Ibrahim. Welcome back to the Deep Dive. If you're tuning in, chances are you understand something pretty fundamental about modern business. Auditing isn't just about ticking boxes anymore. It's strategic. Today, we're diving deep into the definitive guide for management system auditing, ISO 19011. Our mission, really, is to hand you a kind of strategic roadmap for mastering this standard. We want to help you see how to transform auditing from, that sometimes dreaded compliance exercise into a genuinely powerful tool for enabling your business. We're going beyond just the procedures. We'll explore the core principles, the strategic planning, the sharp execution, and really importantly, the strategic communication you need to run an audit program that adds real value, drives that continuous improvement. Now, before we get into the nitty-gritty of the standard, it's probably worth highlighting the kind of expertise that's informing our discussion today. We're drawing on sources shaped by some serious real-world experience. For those of you maybe in finance, governance, risk management, you'll appreciate the perspective someone like Yazan Ibrahim brings. We're talking about experience as head of internal audit for a financial department. That's not just theory, it's ground-level application. It demands, this multidisciplinary skill set. Audit, risk management, financial analysis, they all have to come together. And just to give you a sense of that breadth, think about the certifications involved. CISA, CFE, GRCP, GRCA, FEPA, FMVA, CBCA, BDA. Wow.
Yeah, that's quite a list.
It really is. Covers everything from certified internal auditor and fraud examiner to deep dives into risk governance, financial modeling. It's this kind of comprehensive view that really helps understand how a standard like ISO 19011 actually plays out in, complex, high-stakes environments.
And that background is so relevant because ISO 19011.2018, the version we're focusing on, is designed to be universal. It's genuinely generic. It doesn't matter if you're auditing quality with ISO 9001 or environmental management with 14001, maybe information security with 27001. This framework, it applies.
Across the board, regardless of size or industry.
Across the board. Doesn't matter the size, the sector, the complexity. It provides that common language, that common approach. And the evolution, particularly the 2018 revision, that's where things got, really strategic. It wasn't just a minor update.
What was the big shift then?
The headline change, without a doubt, was formally embedding the risk-based approach as one of the core principles. That wasn't just adding a bullet point. It was a fundamental philosophical shift. It moved auditing from just looking backward, did we follow the rules, to looking forward. Where are the biggest risks to achieving our goals? Where are the best opportunities for improvement?
So it directs the auditor's attention, their resources.
Precisely. Focus your energy where it matters most. It firmly positions auditing as a tool for building resilience and offering strategic foresight, not just checking compliance after the fact.
Okay, so let's unpack that foundation. These 7 principles, you're saying they're the bedrock for getting audit results that people actually trust and crucially act upon.
Absolutely. They set the stage ethically and operationally. If you ignore these, the whole process loses credibility. They aren't just nice to haves.
Got it. So where do we start?
We kick off with the ethical core. Integrity and fair presentation. Integrity is fundamental. It's about honesty, professional responsibility, avoiding conflicts of interest, basically, doing the right thing even when it's difficult.
Pretty straightforward, but essential.
Essential. And fair presentation is how you communicate that integrity. It means your reporting has to be truthful, accurate, objective, timely, clear, and complete. And complete is key here. It means reporting everything relevant, not just the nonconformities, the problems you found, but also the positive observations, the strengths.
Ah, that's interesting. So often audits just focus on what's wrong.
Exactly. And that can distort the picture. If you only highlight the negatives, you're not giving a fair representation of the management system's actual state. Plus, acknowledging strengths builds trust and makes the auditee more receptive to the, perhaps more critical findings.
That makes sense. But, playing devil's advocate for a second, audits are often under time pressure. How do you ensure teams actually spend time looking for and documenting strengths rather than just hunting for nonconformities? Isn't there a practical bias towards the negative?
That's a really fair challenge. It comes back to planning and maturity. A mature audit function, guided by that risk-based thinking, plans time for this. They recognize that identifying a best practice in one area can be shared and provide value elsewhere in the organization. Think of it as internal benchmarking. Finding a really effective way someone's managing a high-risk process, documenting that strength is incredibly valuable. And yes, it takes discipline and needs to be built into the audit plan and checklist, not just left to chance.
Okay, so it needs conscious effort during planning. What comes after integrity and fair presentation?
Next up are due professional care and its close cousin, professional skepticism. Due professional care is about diligence and competence. Using reasonable care and judgment in everything you do as an auditor, it means having the necessary knowledge and skills, applying them thoughtfully throughout the planning, execution, and reporting. It's about the quality of the work itself.
And professional skepticism. That sounds a bit, well, skeptical.
It is, but in a professional sense, it's about maintaining a questioning mind, not automatically accepting assertions or evidence at face value. It means being alert to conditions that might indicate misstatement due to error or fraud.
So not taking things for granted.
Exactly, you challenge assumptions. You look for corroborating evidence. If someone tells you a control is working perfectly, the professionally skeptical auditor says, okay, show me. They might look at logs, observe the process, interview someone else. They triangulate the evidence.
Right. Especially important now with, complex IT systems where things can be hidden or manipulated.
Absolutely vital in the digital age. You can't just trust the documentation. You have to verify the reality.
Okay, that pair makes sense. Diligence plus a questioning mindset. What about the principles dealing with information and impartiality?
That brings us to confidentiality and independence. Confidentiality is about security of information. Auditors get access to sensitive stuff, trade secrets, financial data, personal information. You have a professional and ethical duty to protect that information. Breaching confidentiality destroys trust, which is, well, fatal for an effective audit program. Auditees won't cooperate if they think their sensitive data isn't safe.
Non-negotiable then.
Yeah.
And independence. This seems like a big one, especially for internal auditors.
Huge. Independence is the foundation of impartiality. It means being free from bias and conflict of interest in relation to what you're auditing. You need to be objective in fact and appearance. And ISO 19011 gets quite specific here. It actually highlights 5 common threats to independence that auditors and audit programs need to manage actively.
Okay, what are those 5 threats? This sounds really practical.
They are. First, self-interest. This is where you, the auditor, might benefit financially or otherwise from a particular audit outcome. Maybe auditing a department whose performance impacts your bonus.
Right, obvious conflict there.
Second, self-review. This is a big one for internal teams. It's the risk of auditing work you previously performed or were responsible for. Like, if you help design a process and now you're auditing its effectiveness, it's hard to be objective about your own work.
Yeah, I can see that. You might be invested in proving it works.
Third, familiarity. This comes from long or close relationships with the auditee. You might become too sympathetic, too trusting, and overlook issues you'd otherwise catch. Auditing a friend or family member is the classic example.
Makes sense. Leads to potential bias.
Fourth, intimidation. This is when you feel pressured, overtly or subtly, by the auditee or management to change your findings or maybe limit your scope. Someone might imply negative consequences if you report a certain issue.
Oof, that sounds tough to navigate.
It requires real backbone and support from leadership. And finally, fifth, advocacy. This is where the auditor promotes the auditee's position to the point where objectivity is compromised. Maybe helping them argue against a finding, essentially taking their side.
That's a fantastic breakdown. So managing these 5 threats is key to maintaining that crucial independence.
Absolutely key. It requires ongoing vigilance and often structural safeguards within the audit function.
Okay, that covers 5 principles. What it'll last to? You call them the strategic duo.
Right. These really define the modern value-adding approach. First is the evidence-based approach. This principle is straightforward but powerful. Audit findings and conclusions must be based on verifiable evidence. It means everything you conclude has to be traceable back to specific records, documents, observations, interviews, data logs, whatever form the evidence takes. It has to be sufficient and appropriate. No evidence. Then it's just an opinion, not an audit finding.
So grounding everything in fact.
Precisely. It keeps the audit objective and rational. And the 7th principle, the big addition in 2018, is the risk-based approach.
We touched on this earlier. How does it function as a principle?
As a principle, it dictates that audit activities should be planned and conducted, focusing on the risks and opportunities that are most significant to the organization achieving its objectives. It influences everything what you audit, how deep you go, the samples you select, the resources you allocate. You don't spend equal time on low-risk administrative tasks and high-risk critical operational processes. You prioritize based on potential impact.
It ensures the audit is relevant to the business's real concerns.
Exactly. It makes the audit strategic, forward-looking, and much more valuable than a simple compliance check across the board. It's about focusing limited resources where they can make the biggest difference.
Okay, so with those 7 principles as our foundation, we move into the actual process. You mentioned planning, execution, reporting, and follow-up. Let's talk planning. This feels like where the strategy really gets baked in.
It absolutely is. Poor planning leads to, well, poor execution and ultimately a low-value audit. This is where you translate the principles, especially the risk-based approach, into a concrete action plan. The first step is A, establishing objectives, scope, and resources. This sounds basic, but getting it right is crucial.
So the objectives, they need to be clear.
More than clear, they need to be smart. Specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. And critically aligned with the organization's own goals. So instead of just audit the complaints process, a smart objective might be to verify for Q3 2024 that at least 95% of documented customer complaints related to product line X were investigated and closed within the 30-day timeframe specified in procedure CP007.
That's much more concrete. You know exactly what success looks like.
Exactly. And then there's scope. This needs to be defined with surgical precision. What processes, what locations, what departments, what time period are included, and just as importantly, what is excluded. Being explicit about exclusions manages expectations and prevents scope creep later on. You might say, audit covers the manufacturing process at the Dallas facility from January 1st to June 30th, 2024, excludes supplier quality audits and HR processes.
So clear boundaries are essential. What happens if the scope is fuzzy?
Chaos, usually. Wasted time auditing things you didn't intend to, arguments with the auditee about what was or wasn't covered, and potentially missing the high-risk areas because you got distracted. Precision prevents pain later.
Got it. And resources. Is this just about assigning auditors?
Not quite. It's about assigning the right auditors with the necessary competence and, again, independence for the specific audit. If you're auditing something technically complex, like, say, an environmental control system or a sophisticated financial derivative model, you might need subject matter experts on the team alongside the core auditors.
So multidisciplinary teams might be needed.
Frequently, yes, which adds complexity to resource planning. You need to ensure those specialists are available, competent in auditing techniques, or supported by someone who is, and crucially, independent of the area being audited.
Okay, objectives, scope, resources nailed down. What's the next practical step in planning? You mentioned checklists.
Right. B, developing the audit checklist. For anyone learning this process, the checklist is often seen as just a list of questions, but it's so much more.
How so?
A well-developed checklist is a strategic tool. It ensures consistency, especially if multiple auditors are involved. Everyone's working from the same baseline criteria. It guides the evidence collection process, specifying what to look for. It supports traceability, linking questions back to the standard or procedure clauses, and it acts as a record-keeping tool during the audit itself.
And this is where the risk-based approach comes back in. How do you build risk into a checklist?
Critically important. Risk integration means the checklist should reflect the risk assessment done during planning. You're not giving equal weight to every question. High-risk areas should have more questions, more detailed questions, and require more extensive evidence gathering. You might allocate, say, 50–60% of your checklist items and planned audit time to those high-risk processes identified earlier.
So the checklist itself becomes weighted towards risk.
Exactly. Low-risk areas might get a quicker review, maybe fewer questions, simpler evidence requirements. High-risk areas demand a deeper dive, multiple forms of evidence, perhaps larger sample sizes specified right there in the checklist guidance.
Makes sense. And the questions themselves, how do you make sure they're effective? You mentioned the evidence-based approach earlier.
Yes, the question design is key. Questions must be designed to elicit factual, verifiable evidence, not just opinions or yes-no answers without proof.
Can you give an example of a weak versus a strong question?
Sure. A weak question might be, is the document control procedure followed? The answer is likely just yes, or mostly. It doesn't tell you much. A strong, evidence-based question cluster for the same topic could be, 1. Is there a current approved document register available? Evidence. View register. 2. Are controlled documents uniquely identified with revision status? Evidence. Sample 5 procedures, check headers. 3. Are current versions available where needed? Evidence. Observe 3 workstations, verify procedure versions in use, match the register. 4. Are obsolete documents promptly removed? Evidence. Check archive system physical locations for superseded versions.
I see. Each part demands specific, verifiable evidence.
Precisely. It forces the auditor to look for proof, not just ask for an opinion. That structure makes the checklist a much more rigorous and reliable tool.
All right, planning's done, checklist is ready. Now we hit the ground running with execution. This is where the plan meets reality, right? Where the auditor actually gathers the evidence.
Exactly. This is the operational heart of the audit, and success here depends heavily on the auditor's skill in applying evidence collection techniques, and just as importantly, their communication and professional conduct.
Let's start with the techniques. What are the main ways auditors gather that evidence?
We generally talk about the 3 pillars of evidence gathering: inspection, observation, and interview.
Okay, break those down for us. Inspection.
Inspection is examining records, documents, or tangible assets. Think reviewing log files, checking calibration stickers on equipment, reading through meeting minutes, verifying training records. You're looking at documented proof that something happened or a requirement was met.
Got it. Looking at the paper trail, digital or physical. What about observation?
Observation is watching a process or activity happen in real time. This is crucial for verifying if the documented procedure actually matches what people do day to day. You might watch an operator perform a setup procedure, observe how safety checks are conducted, or witness an inventory count. It provides direct evidence of practices. Sometimes what's written isn't what's happening.
Yeah, that gap between procedure and practice could be where risks hide.
Definitely. And the third pillar is interview. This involves talking to people at different levels within the area being audited, from frontline staff to managers.
What's the goal of interviewing?
It's about gathering insights, understanding context, clarifying information found during inspection or observation, and confirming understanding. People's perspectives can reveal underlying issues or confirm compliance in ways documents alone can't.
Are there specific techniques for effective interviewing? It sounds like it could be tricky.
There are. A common one is the cone technique. You start with broad, open-ended questions. Can you walk me through this process? And then gradually narrow the focus based on the answers. You mentioned a check at this specific step. Can you show me how you perform that check and where it's recorded? Active listening is also vital. Really hearing what's being said, picking up on nuances, and critically summarizing your understanding back to the interviewee. Okay, so just to make sure I've got this right, you're saying the report is generated weekly, and this is the system you use. That confirms accuracy and avoids misunderstandings turning into incorrect findings.
That confirmation step seems really important, prevents errors down the line.
Absolutely. Now, you can't inspect everything, observe everything, or interview everyone. That's where sampling comes in. It's inherent in auditing.
Right. How does ISO 19011 help decide how to sample? It seems like a potential weak spot if you sample badly.
It is a critical area, and it always involves some risk, the risk that your sample isn't representative. Annex A of the standard gives guidance on different sampling strategies. The main ones are statistical sampling, which uses mathematical principles to select a sample size that gives a certain confidence level, often used for large populations, like testing thousands of transactions.
A more formal mathematics.
Yes. Then there's judgment-based sampling. Here, the auditor uses their experience and the risk assessment to focus the sample on specific areas. If past audits or risk analysis points to problems in one particular area, you'd concentrate your sample there. It's very targeted.
Driven by risk and experience.
Exactly. And then there's general selection, which includes things like systematic sampling, every nth item, or random selection using a generator, often used for lower risk areas where bias is the main concern you want to avoid. The key takeaway is that the risk assessment done during planning should heavily influence the sampling strategy and sample sizes. Higher risk means more scrutiny, which often translates to larger or more focused samples.
Okay, that makes sense. Risk drives the sampling approach. Now let's shift to the other side of execution, be communication and professional conduct. You dropped a pretty stunning statistic. Earlier organizations with engaged communication performed 202% better. How does that relate specifically to the auditor during execution?
It's huge. An audit isn't just about finding facts. It's about communicating those facts in a way that leads to understanding and action. This requires real skill. First, think stakeholder centricity. How you communicate findings or ask questions needs to adapt. Talking to a senior executive about strategic risks requires a different approach than discussing a procedural deviation with a shop floor supervisor.
Tailoring the message.
Precisely. Executives need the big picture, the so what. Operational managers need the specifics, the what needs fixing now. And then there are the nonverbal cues. That statistic, about 93% of perceived communication being nonverbal, is startling but true, especially when things get tense.
93%. Wow.
Yeah. It means the auditor's own body language, tone of voice, pace of speaking, it all sends messages. Maintaining a calm, neutral, open posture is crucial for building rapport and projecting objectivity.
So you need to manage your own nonverbals.
Definitely. And you also need to read the auditee's nonverbals. Are they nervous, evasive, confused? Those cues can signal areas needing further investigation or perhaps a gentler approach. Inconsistencies between words and body language are often a red flag.
It adds another layer to evidence gathering, almost. But what about when communication breaks down? C, navigating conflict. It must happen, right? The auditee disagrees strongly with a finding.
It happens. Disagreements are natural, especially when findings have consequences. The key is to handle it professionally and structurally, keeping the focus on the evidence.
Are there frameworks for that?
Yes, there are. For delivering difficult news like a major nonconformity, the SPIKES framework, adapted from healthcare, can be useful.
Spikes. What does that stand for?
Setting up the interview appropriately. Perception, assessing the auditee's understanding first. Invitation, getting their permission to share the information. Knowledge, delivering the factual finding clearly and concisely, referencing evidence. Emotions, acknowledging and managing the emotional response empathetically. Strategy and summary, discussing next steps collaboratively.
That sounds like a very structured, humane way to deliver bad news.
It helps keep things calm and focused. And for direct conflict resolution, when someone disputes the facts, there's a technique sometimes called the AAIA technique.
Okay. AAIA.
Acknowledge their concern. I understand you disagree with this finding. Understand their perspective. Ask clarifying questions. Discuss the evidence. Calmly present the objective evidence again. Identify common ground. We both want this process to be effective, right? Take action together. Agree on next steps. Maybe gather more evidence, escalate, or proceed with the finding.
Again, very structured. Keeps it from becoming personal.
That's the goal. Stick to the facts, follow a process, maintain professionalism. It preserves the relationship while ensuring the integrity of the audit process isn't compromised.
All right. Execution's complete, evidence gathered, conflicts navigated, hopefully. Now comes the crucial output, the audit report.
Yeah.
This is the main deliverable, isn't it? Where all that work gets translated into something the organization can actually use.
Absolutely. The report is where the audit transitions from an activity to actionable intelligence. It needs to be more than just a data dump. It has to be a strategic communication tool.
So structure is important. Does ISO 19011 specify what needs to be in the report?
It does. A mandatory report structure is outlined in Clause 6.5.1 of the 2018 standard. It ensures consistency and that key information isn't missed. You absolutely must include things like the audit objectives, were they met? The scope, what was covered? The audit criteria, what did you audit against? The audit findings, and the overall audit conclusions.
That sounds comprehensive.
Yeah.
Anything else particularly crucial?
Yes, one element that's vital is the sampling limitations statement. This is basically a disclaimer acknowledging that the findings are based on a sample, not the entire population, and therefore carry an inherent level of uncertainty. It manages expectations about the absolute certainty of the conclusions.
Important for managing risk and liability, I imagine.
Very. And beyond structure, the language used is critical for impact. We aim for the 4 C's framework. The report must be clear, correct, complete, and concise.
Clear, correct, complete, concise. Let's break that down.
Clear. Avoid jargon. Be unambiguous. Correct. Factually accurate. Traceable to evidence. Complete. Contains all necessary info, no critical omissions. Concise. Gets to the point, respects the reader's time, avoids fluff.
Makes sense. Easy to read, easy to trust, easy to understand. Now, the real meat of the report is the findings. How should those be structured for maximum impact?
This is where B, the 5 C's of a finding, comes in. This structure is widely recognized as best practice because it forces the finding to be actionable. Miss 1 C and the finding loses punch.
Okay, the 5 C's, what are they?
They are 1. Criteria. What should be happening? This is the standard, the procedure, the regulation you audited against. You have to state it explicitly. 2. Condition. What is actually happening? This is the factual description of the deviation you observed, supported by evidence. 3. Cause. Why did the deviation happen? This requires root cause analysis. What's the underlying reason? 4. Consequence. So what? What's the actual or potential impact of this deviation? Think risk, financial, operational, reputational, safety. 5. Corrective action. What needs to be done to fix the cause and prevent it from happening again? This is the recommendation.
That framework really forces you to think through the whole problem, from standard to solution. The cause and consequence seem particularly important for driving action.
They are absolutely critical. Just stating the condition and criteria tells you what's wrong, but not why or why it matters. Cause gets to prevention, consequence gets management attention by highlighting the risk.
And getting to the cause requires digging deeper, right? That brings us to C-root cause analysis, RCA.
Exactly. Simply fixing the condition, the symptom, is a temporary fix. RCA is essential to identify the fundamental reason for the failure so you can prevent it from recurring. A mature audit program insists on proper RCA.
What's a practical way to do RCA? It sounds complex.
One of the simplest and often most effective tools is the 5 whys. You just keep asking why until you get past the symptoms and arrive at the underlying systemic issue.
Can you walk us through an example, maybe that machine interlock bypass you mentioned earlier?
Sure, let's refine that. Observation condition. Operators are bypassing safety interlocks on machine 4. Criteria. Safety procedure SP101 requires interlocks engaged. Observation condition. Why 1? Because the interlocks prevent startup when the machine is cold. Observation condition. Why 2? Because the sensors controlling the interlocks malfunction when cold. Observation condition. Why 3? Because the wrong type of sensor, not rated for the low temperatures experienced during startup in that factory zone, was installed. Observation condition. Why 4? Because the procurement specification didn't account for the actual operating temperature range, only the average range. Why 5? Root cause. Because the process for translating operational environmental data into procurement specifications during the machine design phase was flawed. There was a communication breakdown between engineering and operations.
Wow, so the fix isn't just retrain operators or replace sensor, it's fix the design and procurement specification process.
Precisely. That addresses the systemic issue and prevents similar problems on other machines or future projects. Stopping at Y1 or 2 just means the problem will come back.
That really demonstrates the power of RCA. Now, once you have these findings, they need to be classified, right?
Yeah.
Major, minor.
Yes. Classification importance is key for prioritizing response. Findings are typically categorized maybe as critical, major nonconformity, NC, minor NC, or opportunity for improvement, OFI. Major nonconformities are the serious ones. They indicate a significant failure in the management system, something that could stop it from achieving its intended results. Think systemic failures, breaches of legal requirements, things that pose a serious risk.
And they require a faster response.
Typically, yes. Organizations often have procedures requiring corrective action plans for major NCs within a very short time frame, like maybe 14 days, because the risk is considered high. Minor NCs are usually isolated lapses that don't threaten the whole system, and OFIs are suggestions where things are compliant but could be better.
Okay, so the report is delivered, findings classified, RCA done. But the process doesn't end there, does it? ISO 19011 emphasizes the audit program itself needs to improve. We need to look beyond compliance for the audit function, too.
Absolutely. An audit program should be a learning system. It needs to get better, more efficient, more effective over time. This requires a focus on best practices for program maturity.
What does that look like in practice?
It relies heavily on creating systematic feedback loops. You need mechanisms to learn from each audit. Things like structured post-audit debrief sessions, not just about the findings, but about the audit process itself. What went well? What challenges did the team face? What could be done better next time? Involving the audit team management in this provides valuable perspective.
So feedback on the audit process.
Yes. Also, using stakeholder surveys to formally capture feedback from auditees and other stakeholders. Are they satisfied? Do they feel the audit added value? Was the team professional and independent?
Gathering data on performance.
Exactly. And all this feedback, along with insights from the audits themselves, should feed into a lessons learned database or similar knowledge management system. This helps identify recurring issues, trends, and areas where the overall audit methodology or auditor training might need improvement.
It sounds like applying continuous improvement principles to the audit function itself.
That's precisely it. And nowadays, leveraging technology is a huge part of program maturity.
How is technology changing auditing?
In several ways. Audit management software is almost essential now for efficient planning, scheduling, work paper management, finding tracking, and reporting. It improves consistency and traceability.
Streamlining the workflow.
Definitely. Then there's data analytics. Auditors can now analyze entire populations of data, not just samples, using specialized tools. This allows for identifying anomalies, trends, and potential risks much more effectively than manual methods. Think continuous auditing or monitoring.
Moving beyond sampling in some areas.
In some cases, yes, or allowing for much smarter sampling. And increasingly, we're seeing artificial intelligence, AI, being used, maybe for initial document review, scanning contracts for specific clauses, or automating repetitive compliance checks, freeing up human auditors for more complex judgment-based tasks.
So technology is becoming a key enabler for more effective auditing.
Without a doubt, it enhances efficiency, effectiveness, and the ability to provide deeper insights.
And these aren't just theoretical benefits. You mentioned real-world value in case studies. Can you share some examples of how applying ISO 1911 principles well has made a difference?
Yeah, the evidence is compelling. We know that organizations using structured checklists based on risk see significantly fewer oversight studies suggest around 35% fewer and achieve about 40% better consistency in how findings are identified and reported.
Those are significant numbers.
Yeah.
What about specific company examples?
Let's take the manufacturing marvel case study. This global manufacturer was plagued by high product defect rates, impacting customer satisfaction and warranty costs. They implemented an audit program fully aligned with ISO 1911, with a strong emphasis on risk-based planning, targeting critical production stages, and mandatory RCA training for auditors using the 5 Whys.
So they really focus on those key principles. What happened?
Within 2 years, by systematically finding and addressing the root causes of production failures identified through audits, they reduced overall product defects by 40%. That had a massive positive impact on the bottom line and customer loyalty. The audit program became a source of competitive advantage.
40% is huge. Any other examples?
Consider the pharmaceutical leader case. Pharma is obviously heavily regulated, high risk. This company was growing fast, but their internal audits were becoming slow and inefficient, creating delays. They applied the ISO 1911 risk-based approach rigorously. They strategically reduced audit scope and frequency in lower-risk areas to free up resources. They also implemented a digital audit platform for better workflow and evidence management.
And the result?
They significantly improved audit efficiency, cutting average cycle times by around 30%. More importantly, they could better focus their resources on the high-risk regulatory compliance areas, ensuring those critical aspects were always robustly audited. Efficiency gained didn't compromise effectiveness where it mattered most.
Those examples really bring home the practical value. It underlines C, the need for adaptability, doesn't it? The world changes, risks change, so auditors and audit programs have to evolve.
Constantly. Continuous improvement applies just as much to the auditors themselves. They need to keep updating their technical knowledge, new standards, new technologies, new risks like cybersecurity or AI ethics. But just as importantly, they need to hone their soft skills. Emotional intelligence, communication, conflict resolution using frameworks like spikes or audit, critical thinking, influencing skills. These are essential for turning audit findings into organizational change. It's a continuous learning journey. #tag outro.
Okay, this has been incredibly insightful. Let's try to summarize the key takeaways for everyone listening. Mastering ISO 1911, it seems, isn't about memorizing clauses. It's about adopting a strategic mindset. It means truly living those 7 principles: integrity, fair presentation, due care, skepticism, confidentiality, independence, and the evidence-based approach. It means embedding that crucial risk-based thinking into how you plan, and especially how you design checklists. It means using analytical tools like the 5 Whys to dig for genuine root causes, not just symptoms. And maybe most surprisingly for some, recognizing that communication clear, concise, stakeholder-centric, and even nonverbal is a critical strategic tool for making sure audits actually lead to improvement.
Well put. And if you connect all those dots, you see the transformation. When reports are built on solid evidence, use the 5 C's framework effectively, and offer actionable recommendations addressing root causes, auditing stops being just a cost center or a compliance hurdle. It genuinely becomes a source of competitive advantage. It drives efficiency, reduces risk, builds stakeholder trust, and fosters that culture of sustainable excellence that everyone's aiming for. It becomes a core part of good governance and organizational resilience. So we talked quite a bit about the risk-based approach helping target emerging challenges. Here's something for you to think about, building on that. Imagine your organization is going through a major digital transformation. Lots of new cloud systems, maybe new security architecture. And it's your own internal IT department that has designed, built, and implemented these critical systems. Now, as an auditor applying ISO 1911, how do you navigate the principle of independence, specifically mitigating the self-review threat, when you need to audit the effectiveness and security of those very systems built by your colleagues down the hall? What extra safeguards might you need beyond just assigning a different auditor from the same internal team to ensure genuine impartiality in such a high-risk, specialized assessment?
That is a really relevant and tricky question for today's environment. Definitely something to ponder, highlighting how these principles need constant, thoughtful application. A great place to leave it. Thank you so much for walking us through this complex standard with such clarity. And thank you all for joining us on the deep dive. If this exploration of ISO 19011 was valuable, please do share it. Keep digging deeper, keep improving. We'll see you next time.